Have you got what it takes to be an administrator? How can you know for sure? Our interview with Dr. Greg Moncada will help you fill in some pieces of this puzzle that you may not have considered. Greg's thoughtful, personal approach to the subject really made an impression on me. He focused on character traits and values rather than on specific skills. It was a wonderful experience for me, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well. Check out our show notes to learn more about Greg's long and eventful international teaching and administrative career. This episode was recorded on July 11th, 2023. Sit back, relax, and breathe in these helpful tips from a mindful leader.
Hello, Greg. Welcome to the podcast. And I'm wondering, where in the world are you? But more importantly, where are you headed?
David, Audrey, it's so good to hear your voices. And thank you for having me on your podcast. It's an honor and a privilege. And where am I now? I'm currently in Huntsville, Alabama, but I'm coming from Qatar, where I work for the Qatar Foundation. And I was the founding director of the Qatar Academy for Science and Technology, the very first STEM school in Qatar. And mission accomplished. That job has, I've now elected to leave. However, the school is fully accredited, recognized by the ministry, and our students are going to some of the top universities in the world. So it was an amazing and a wonderful experience. But I'm headed to a destination that I'm just both inspired by and excited for. It's the Harare International School in Harare, Zimbabwe, HIS. It has an amazing mission, a mission that students and teachers and administrators can live every day. So very excited to be once again in sub-equatorial Africa and specifically in Zimbabwe.
Most excellent. And, I followed your progress there in Qatar in building that school from scratch. And it's just been kind of neat to hear about your journey. And now you're going on the next stage of your journey, which gets into our topic we'll talk about in just a minute. I did want to mention on a side note that you are a triple winner for me with my podcasting efforts. First, there was the Shifting Our School podcast with Jeff and myself. And then there was the EdTech Co-op podcast with Mark Hofer and Jeff. And now you join Audrey and myself. So thanks for taking the time over the years to share your experiences and expertise.
Always happy to participate, Dave.
Awesome. All right. So let's look at the idea of all these journeys you've taken in life, and I've made a few trips with you. Do you have a going global story that you could share with us?
Dave, I was thinking about this, and I was really wondering whether you want something interesting and humorous or something serious and important.
Oh, interesting and humorous.
Admin 101 is what I call this story. There I was, a very fresh, new, young administrator in South Africa at one of the big schools in Johannesburg. And on this particular day, I was at that time the assistant superintendent, and it was after school. Not many people were there. And our tennis coach came running into the office to say, Greg, we've got the ring calls. And I'm a biology guy, so I knew what he was talking about. And I said, where? He says, out in the hutch near the tennis courts. So little backstory, we had, as part of the property of the school, 80 hectares behind the school, and it was left as Highveld for many, many years. And we knew that there were a number of creatures that lived back there, and specifically a colony of rinkals, spitting cobras. Ooh. And these are terrifying snakes. They're incredibly aggressive, and they're called pseudo cobras because their hood isn't fully developed. But they rear up and they flare their hood and they spit. And the spit is a proteolytic enzyme that can cause your eyes to turn opaque immediately. And then the venom is, of course, incredibly toxic. Venom, and it can kill you. And so we knew that these creatures lived back there, the snake colony lived back there, and we were selling the land, so we bulldozed the veld. And we knew that they would be coming down the hill into our property. but we really weren't sure when or how. And of course, it was tennis season, and they went into this cinder block hutch that was nice, cool, and dark. And thankfully, the coach went in with his sunglasses to grab the nets to put them up on the tennis courts. And he came back, and his vision was blurry. He pulled off his glasses, and they were covered with spit.
Oh, my.
Okay. And then he felt his face, and his face was covered with this liquid. He didn't know what it was. But then he smelled kind of a reptilian smell, and he goes, wrinkles. And so he grabbed me. He said, Greg, what do we do? And then I had this decision, and this is why it's Admin 101. I didn't know really who to call. Now, remember, we're in South Africa. There are 11 national languages. And in the school, we had over 11 different tribal affiliations for the workers at the school. 2 of the tribes are warlike tribes, the Zulu and the Shangaan. They're both fierce, and they don't talk to each other. Their languages don't mix. And so they would pass each other in the hall, and they would make, kind of jabs at each other, and they kept their distance from each other because they knew that there was a generational hatred between them. You had to know how to manage these different workers so that they weren't necessarily working in the same room together. And so who do you call, a Zulu or a Shangaan? Who's the most fierce? Well, I went with, and this was the decision, I went with the most senior administrator among the Shangaans or the Zulus, and it happened to be a Zulu. He was head of the bus pool. And I'll change the names to protect the innocent, but I'll say that Bill was the head of that bus pool. And I said, Bill, I called him up, we have wrinkles in the tennis hutch. He says, I'll be right there. I'll be right there. And so we all run out, and he comes with his Zulu shield and assegai and 4 other guys who have their assegai and Zulu shield. They have residences near the school, and they've grabbed these weapons, and they get around the hutch, and they have a semicircle with Bill in the middle and the 2 guys flanking on either side, and they start chanting and clapping and getting themselves built up because they're going to go in and they're going to kill this snake. And they all put glasses on. I made them put glasses on. And so the first guy makes a false charge. And I wish I could do it physically because there's a real interesting way that they do this, but it's really aggressive. And they make a false charge, and they're screaming and yelling, and they're egging each other on and building each other up. And they all take a false charge. Now it's Bill's turn, the big guy. He's going to go in, and he's the most fierce. He goes in and he skewers this wrinkles. It's about a 5.5 foot long snake. Wow. It's a big, thick, ugly snake. These things are really, really, really ugly. And then they all descend on this snake. He comes out with it waving over his head. And he throws it on the ground, and they all descend on it, and he hacks it. They all hack it to pieces. And then Bill says to one of the guys, he goes, go get some wood. And I said, but what is the wood for? And he goes, but we're going to make a fire. We're going to burn the snake here. I said, why do you burn the snake? And he goes, we must release the spirit. There's a spirit that's trapped in this snake, and we have to let it go. So there, right on the edge of the tennis court, they build a fire and they burn the snake. And and I walked away going, that was just this amazing experience. I mean, here it is, modern day South Africa. It was quite an unexpected experience. But the next day, the leader of the most senior Shangaan comes to me, angry, absolutely as threatening as he could be, to let me know his ire that he was not selected to be the most fierce to go in to kill this snake. And I felt obliged to make a public apology to all of the tribes, but specifically to the Shangaans. And my promise was that in the event that there was another snake, that I would call them first. And so, Admin 101, who do you choose? That's my story.
That's
awesome.
Now, in hindsight, I'm curious whether you think the Zulus would have been up in arms if you had chosen the Shangaan guy.
Well, it would have been something nowadays. I would have said, how do y'all handle snakes?
Right.
But what I would do now, and this was something that I didn't know to do then, but I would have called a snake handler. No, honestly, in terms of risk and in terms of recognizing that we were visitors in the snake's territory and that we need to honor that. While I recognize that the school's not about supporting, venomous snake life. I do recognize that there could have been a way to have transplanted that snake colony. And I would have done that differently. I wouldn't have simply bulldozed that back 40. And I would have gone through and made an environmental essay of what was out there and what we should do and to properly manage those creatures, that wildlife. It would have been also valuable to have done a survey of the botanicals that were in that region to see if there was anything specific that we should have been concerned about. And I would take a whole different approach now. But it was just one of these things. I was still a young, pretty fresh administrator and just was in fear of my people, my teachers, my students getting hurt by this very aggressive snake. So
yeah. And so, Greg, you got to feel good, though. Our listeners, all these administrators around the world, hopefully listening, are going to go, okay, I'm going to add that to my playbook. Let's do the biological study before we do this thing. So
as a science teacher, everything's an experiment. So I've got to, it would be very interesting to have looked. It was a long-lived colony. It was really probably something interesting to observe. So,
well, I was appreciating your humility and thinking to myself that any new admin out there would find solace in the idea that it's okay if you mess up because things will go on and stuff happens and you make the decision with the information that you've got at the time. And, you can always reflect and it's a learning moment and all of that. So thank you for sharing that. That was an awesome story. Because I've read a lot of Wilbur Smith, so I'm very into the whole, the Zulu and the Asige, which is their big
it's a
machete sword thing, right? Pointed sword,
machete.
And I can picture the whole scene that you're referring to, and I love that story. Thank you so much. Very visual. So now I guess we need to move into our guiding question, which is, what are the steps in the process of moving from a teaching to an admin position? So you've shared, when you had just gotten there, but tell us about the steps you took to get there. So as a sub-question to the overall question, please share with us the skills, experience, and accomplishments that you need to move into an administrative role.
Thank you, Audrey. That's a big question. I'm going to break it down a little bit. And I'm going to really start from a very high level, because for some of those listeners out there, they may already know from the beginning that they want to be a leader. And they're just, in many ways, as I've observed, they're built that way. And I've seen people move very quickly from teaching to various administrative positions and then to principal positions and directors. And they've far accelerated past me and others. It's always been amazing for me to watch that. So I didn't come to administration that way. I taught for 15 years. I loved teaching. But then I had a number of experiences that made me think that I could be of use and of service as an administrator. So I began really asking myself questions like, why? Why would you want to become an administrator? And they have this method for asking why 5 times. Why? Well, I would like to be able to create the structure. That's neat. Is that the only way to do it? Do I need to be a coordinator, a team leader, a curriculum developer? Why? Because maybe it's something that allows me to share ideas and then therefore have more people engage with those ideas and improve student learning. Why? And you just go down through this process and you rigorously ask yourself. Ultimately, you get to this question of pride and of professional growth and direction. And I stopped at professional growth. I was curious. I wanted to learn more. I felt a little stuck. And I felt like that was a signal to me to start continually asking those 5 whys. And ultimately, it came to, how do I serve my family? How do I utilize my mind to develop new and different ideas and help propel the school forward? How do I increase my remuneration over time to support my family? How do I create a life around that? And so these were things that I just really had to ask myself a lot and often. So that's the very first question that I would ask of the listeners. Are you someone who naturally went into teaching and you knew you were going to be an administrator? Or is it something that you've often wondered? And if you have, then I think the very first step is to ask yourself why. the next step to look around where you can be of service. And so it's this mindset. So I would just reiterate to just know what you want and know why you want it. That's the first step. And the second step would then be to look within your organization to see where you can be of service. And sometimes it's very small steps. It could be that you could run the weekly news update. It could just be that you have an optional meeting on a Wednesday for 15 minutes. You corral the information for next week and the week after. You put that on a shared document, and then you present that and you give everybody an opportunity to detail the future of the school. So you smooth out the execution of all of the different operations within the school. And that might be something that some schools already have, but if there's an administrator that is doing that, you could always ask, can I take this week? Can I take that week? Can I do that for this long? And it gives you an opportunity to see the vast array of different operations that administrators see. And so that's a simple one. Another one could be a formal position where it could be a coordinator or a team leader. It could be episodic, where you have a committee that you can join and you can provide support. And it would be jumping in at the base level. Here, I'll take the minutes. I'll corral the minutes for you. Get yourself in, you step up into these little roles that allow you to understand a broader perspective of what some aspects of admin are like, but also whether you like doing that or not, and whether or not it answers some of the whys that you're after. Now, if you run in with an agenda like I want to change this and I want to do that, you might find some resistance. But if you walk in with a mindset of serving others and helping coordinate and smoothing out things in the school, then the administrators at the school are going to see you as broadly supportive and in line with what they're currently doing, and willing to look upon you at opportunities that may empower you to do still more. So that would be the second piece that I would do. Step up to little pieces. It could just be a presentation at your some aspect of professional development that you happen to know about or that you've researched and you'd like to present. But these little steps indicate to the administrators that you're looking for ways to lead, that you are looking for ways to support the ongoing operations at the school, and that it sets you up for being considered for other more formal positions. In the meantime, and the third part is, what kind of credentials do you need in order to move into formal positions? And so I'm going to suggest that you don't consider looking at master's programs. Look at the job descriptions on the various sites that offer jobs. So go to Search Associates, look at some of those job descriptions, go to ISS, look at those job descriptions, meet with recruiters, get job descriptions, and read through those thoroughly to see where you identify with yourself and whether you can do what they're being asked to do in that particular job. And so these are easy places to go to figure out what kind of work administrators do. And therefore, you can make a tick box, make a spreadsheet of those different things that you resonate with. I can do this, I can do this. And you may find a position for which you may be immediately able to do. But at the end, they're always going to say, what are the criteria? You need 3 to 5 years of teaching experience. You're going to need at least a master's, and best if it's in some kind of administrative practice or curriculum development practice. It could be an MBA, which is actually a really interesting bifurcation in stepping a little bit away from education, but then utilizing the leadership skills that they teach in those degree programs for project management and whatnot. You can easily relate that to that. It also sets you up for understanding finances at the school and how the business operates. But that would be that third step, actually look for job descriptions and identify what is you. And then last, really, and this is probably the most important thing, and it should have been the first thing, and that was talk a lot about this with your partner, because you're not the one ultimately making the decision. You are making a collective decision with your partner, because it is going to cause you to reallocate your time. And an administrator, assistant principal and above, is remunerated for being available at all times. And if you are not in a relationship where your partner or your children can support that, then it's going to have serious implications for how you manage your relationships within your family. And so those would be the 5 steps, or the 5 things I would be asking you as a potential administrator in my organization, and then looking for ways to empower you to make those first initial steps.
Well, Greg, if I was wearing socks, I would say you just knock them off, but I'm not. So I'm going to make a connection to Audrey and her work as a life coach, and how you ended that, the whole idea that if someone, a teacher came to you and was talking to you and asking for advice, that you really would be in that life coaching, that mentoring role. And what you just shared is so invaluable, because in life with big decisions, it starts with the self. You, as you said, you need to reflect and say, what are my motivations? And as you said, with the 5 whys, why am I doing this? And you just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper with each of those whys. And then I really appreciate how you are laying out almost like a continuum, moving you with your experience, skill attainment, confidence, whether you're a natural leader or it's just something that you need to work on, that you go through that progression. I think that's a key word that you've been talking about. All that I hope our listeners can take to heart. And I love the idea of making a spreadsheet and just getting all this down so you can see it in black and white and unpack it. And as you're going through it, add to it. So thank you for those insights.
I would add, David, that a lot of times administrators would probably start with what they've learned, that an administrator has to have certain kinds of attributes. But as I've observed, administrators come in all shapes and sizes. And I could say that an administrator has to be articulate, they have to be proactive, they have to have fantastic communication and organizational skills, they have to be a people person and love people. And all of those things do matter. And, I could be very formal about and prescriptive about those kinds of attributes. But from a personal level, I've realized that you can develop those attributes, or you can use other attributes as strengths in different ways. And so there's no one size fits all. And yes, in your MBA program or in your leadership program, you're going to get those continua, and you're going to reflect on each one of those aspects of leadership. And it's going to help you better identify your strengths and weaknesses. But you can be an individual who is a very effective collaborator. And leaders such as that often prosper, where the person who stands up in front of everybody and looks and acts like a leader is not as effective. You can be a technocratic leader, because if you can sit shoulder to shoulder with the teacher and say, here's how you introduce students to this standard, here's how you put this into your LMS, and here's how we measure this. And if you can support teachers with actual skills that you can share with them, then you're providing a foundation of trust and teamwork that is absolutely critical and essential to the successful execution of a position like that. So, I take it from a very personal perspective first. Let the other traditional perspectives come into place, but recognize that anybody can start.
I love that you mentioned a spreadsheet. I was thinking in my head, that's so David. And then David concurred.
What can I say? I'm going to...
Yeah, birds of a feather. Maybe you can go into a few more of the, thank you for the insights you've shared. And those are certainly helpful characteristics to have. I wonder if you could please just for the sake of the audience members who aren't so sure, go over a couple of the, what you called more traditional characteristics or things a person could ask themselves. Am I this? Am I that? Am I ready to,
See, Audrey, I don't know that I would do that, because next year there's going to be another book that's going to identify a bunch of different attributes. And I've watched it come and go.
Sure.
And next year, the Wow Now thing is going to be all about this form of communication or that form of communication, or, it should be informed with, Chat GPT. And
I knew you were going to say that.
I don't know that that's how I would approach it. If I would ask those individuals why. I'd ask them what their long-term goal is. I would ask them to step up. I would ask them to continue moving forward, and let me find ways to help support them so that we can help them identify what attributes they have and how they can extend those attributes and how they can backfill in areas that I observe that might be needing some support. So I can go through and say, well, this and such person said at this and such time that these people need to be really, really strong organizers. They need to be really collaborative, and they need to be really communicative. They need to, but then I'm going to turn around and say, it starts with love. Do you love working with children and ensuring that their learning is improved? Do you love working with people? Are you willing to listen to people's concerns, problems? And are you willing to engage with them in a sincere way to help support them, ultimately to improve student learning? And I think that's the heart of it. And if you don't have that, you could be incredibly articulate. You could be really effective as a team leader. But if you don't start with an actual desire to care for people and students and children and parents, then you're going to find that job very, very hard. It's going to just suck the life out of you because you really just want to go home and watch baseball. But, that's not the job. The job is you need to be there for them. And yes, there are limits. Yes, there are boundaries. You are able to set some of those boundaries, but you're going to get the late night phone calls. And you better be there. And if it's like, I'm sorry, I punched the clock at 6:00, I'm not available, that's not the job. The job is you need to be available. And so you need to start with, am I willing to do that? And I can tell you, I've gotten some late night calls after a dance. Where's my daughter? Daughter jumped on the wrong bus. You better find that daughter. So, these are things that you need to, these aren't just, it's not perfunctory. It's you are privileged to engage in people's lives at a level that is deep and private. And you need to be ready for that, willing to support people to do that. So yeah, I could list everything, all these attributes. There's rubrics out there. Go to Danielson. You'll find those rubrics. You can go and look at Marzano. Marzano is going to tell you all of the different high probability actions administrators take to improve student learning. Go there. It's research-based. You'll never go wrong. But I don't administrate from a robotic, mechanistic, process-driven perspective. I do from my heart, and I start with love.
That's a wonderful response. And the response itself was from the heart, which I really enjoyed hearing. I love it. Mindful, intentional process. Thank you. So, having met the required career criteria, what recruiting steps does one take in order to become an administrator?
I can think of a number. The first is you've been looking at job descriptions for a while now. You're getting a sense of what schools look for, what they want. You're looking and reflecting on what your attributes are. So you should have a sense of familiarity regarding what kind of positions you have the means to meet. And that's going to help direct you to schools that have positions that you feel confident about. Having said that, there is a time where you need to make that jump. And if you were in a school and you've expressed to the current administration your desire for admin and you've stepped in and stepped up, they will be the first persons you refer to say, in this upcoming season, I will be applying for positions. Can you provide me with an excellent recommendation? And don't ask for a good recommendation. Be fearless. Ask for an excellent recommendation. And if they say no, they're not on your team. Build your team. And so that would be the next step. And then build your CV and work with people on what that CV looks like. It's got to be a front of a page and a back of a page at most. And have that CV ready to go, because the first thing that they're going to ask for is a cover letter and a CV. And that gets your foot in the door for the long list. And that CV will also have your referees. And what I've done at the director level is I've asked my referees to provide a small comment or some personal statement about me that would give them a little bit of color and a little bit of depth about the kinds of ways I've approached questions. And so there's that third paper, which is referee list, and then you have some anecdotes about Greg's administrative practice. And so that's what I would definitely develop and get ready. And you start with the kind of leader you are, that you lead with your whole heart, that you lead with the intentions to improve student learning, and that you're looking for a mission-driven school that is a place where you can serve. That's the second step, is get that CV well honed and then start putting your name in the pool and generating responses. Sometimes you can hire agents, and that's sometimes really effective, especially to get people working on your behalf. I've never done that. However, I've met most of the people that are those kinds of agents, and they're almost invariably happy to promote me as part of that pool. So that would be something you would get if you went to conferences. You would get to meet these administrators. You'd get to meet some of these agents that can help support you and get to know you. And they will typically interview in advance, and they will support you. But that's certainly a way to go, and it's certainly a way that you can definitely get a broader range of support, because they're going to be able to say, you need to modify your CV to look like this. And so you can get some expert results that way. And then before you submit your documentation to this particular position, you need to put in about 3 hours of research about the school. And you need to absolutely interrogate their website. You need to talk to anybody that you might know that has been at that school, but you need to start with their mission, and you need to look to see how they have created a website that supports that mission. And of course, you need to understand all of the baselines. What is their program, IB, AP, A level? How does that look? What is the feel of that program? Are they, what is their academic achievement? How do they just go after and absorb what that school really is, so that in the event that you get a screening interview as part of the long list, you can speak to the mission and you can relate to them how you identify with the mission, and you can give them concrete examples from their website. So you need to let them know that you have done a bit of homework, and that you are keenly interested in this position, and that you feel as though you have a lot to offer and can serve that school and those students by way of this job description and by way of your resources and assets and background. And so that's something that I do. I typically would spend 3 hours to develop that cover letter. It's only 3 or 4 paragraphs long. So as Mark Twain once said, if I had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter, and you have to actually spend a lot of time to get those comments and those letters in a way that actually reach out and let them know that you care a lot about their school. And so if you can get your foot in the door and you do get the screening interview, be sure to listen very carefully to the questions. They might be very basic. I see that you have AP background. We're an A-level school. How could you adapt your, we're keenly interested in your background related to this, but we also see this, and can you speak to that, et cetera. And you just come right back with, as your mission suggests, this would be a key attribute to anybody that would work in the school. I believe in your mission, and this is how my background and knowledge can propel that mission. And so you definitely need to study how you're going to interview and how you're going to make sure that you have at least expressed to them yourself and how you identify with the mission, and then let them make that final decision if you get moved into the finalist list.
Greg, I appreciate that preliminary research that as educators we all do as we're looking at schools, but the in-depth nature of someone applying for an administrative position needs to do. So let's say you've had that screening interview, and now they're going to call you in as one of the finalists.
Yeah.
What is the prep for that interview? What should take place during that interview? And let's say maybe you get a campus visit.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that a candidate needs to prepare to be ready for this?
Thank you. So I mentioned about 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. You don't just write a cover letter and send it in, say, hi, I'm Greg, and I know how to do this. You've spent time and you've made this cover letter as sincere and intentional and authentic as possible. You've gotten on the long list. You've been given a screening, and now you're invited to the short list. This is typically 6, it can be up to 15. I know that some hiring committees like to have about 15 candidates, and they will move through those, and they'll probably get down to 3 to 6 candidates, and then they will do an hour-long interview. To prepare for that hour-long interview, I have spent over 6 hours in my further research. I don't tend to overcommit on the first review, but I do commit to that hour-long interview, and I generate responses to potential questions. Some of the basic questions, they're coming. Tell us about yourself. Better have a good answer. Better be able to spin it right back to the school, right, and how you relate to the school. A lot of these questions are already baked in, and you're going to want to talk about it cogently, but more so, you're going to want to talk about it in relation to the school. And so in order to really engage in that content, you need to understand and know that content. You need to read it again and again. And you need to act as though you're actually an employee at the school and that you're living that mission. And so you're really committing to a vision of yourself at that school and how you would function and operate. And that takes a lot of time, but don't think that you're going to come in on a big gust of wind and talk fancy and have them be blown away by you. They want to know that you care about kids, that you care about the school, and that you want to propel that mission in terms of that position. So I'd say I've definitely worked up to 6 hours on that interview. And then I have questions for them. I will generate a short list of questions. They will give you an opportunity to ask those questions. One of the favorite questions that I've always asked in interviews, and something that I see coming up more and more, is at the very end of the interview, they will say, is there anything that we haven't talked about that would present to us a new and different aspect of yourself that we haven't currently addressed? And be ready for that question, because this is a chance for you to really say, this is the kind of person I am. This is how I work. And let me give you an example of that. The other day I had a student come into my office and they had this problem. And so it really, you can just try to make sure that you help them understand how you live their mission and how, in that example, you responded in a way that would have been directly in line with how they would have responded. And so, if nothing else, you've walked away having been authentic, having shared with them honestly about who you are, and then they can make that choice about you. And so I feel like when you've engaged and you've become a member of that faculty, a member of that administrative practice, that indeed they're going to note that, they're going to feel that, and you're going to provide for them a sincere representation of yourself.
I love the idea of acting as if you're already part of the faculty and living the mission. That's a wonderful tip that I think makes a lot of sense and can be really helpful for sure. Do you have any thoughts on what kind of vibes might lead someone to think, yes, I definitely feel like I'm a good fit for this prospective school regarding my needs, their needs, and maybe some sort of red flags that might get someone thinking, ooh, I'm not so sure?
This is a great question. And as a candidate, I never really talk so much about my needs. I talk about what I can provide. I never talk about package. I don't even look. I mean, I've looked at the job description and I know what the package might be, but it's not about that for me. It's about, can I make a difference? And so I'm going to express and share that. If the response to the question is a redirect, and that happens a lot, then I've missed something big. And so typically, if there's a redirect, then I'm going to come back and ask a question. Is this what you're looking for? Perhaps I didn't hear this question as it was intended. Your intent is to find out and then talk it through so that you make sure you're hitting the right question. If, for example, they turn back and say, no, we really just wanted to know about this, and you're getting indications that they are looking, and some very corporate-based schools are looking for you to fill a box, and they may want you to answer within the box. And so you may need to dial back your expansive response, but are you able to coordinate an IB program? Yes, I have this many years of experience in teaching IB, and this is what I've done. Here's some of the practices that I've done as an IB coordinator. What I believe is critical to being a great IB coordinator is this and this and this. And they're going to say, well, tell us more about how you handled these. And they're going to be very lockstep and very in the box. And so keep hitting those examples. But that typically, if that builds up and you're actually thinking beyond the position, that's a flag. That's an indication that in your heart and in your spirit, you might be frustrated because they just really want someone to come in and manage something. And if that's this first position you can get, then take it and manage and then grow through it. But the flags do start adding up over time. And I've had interviews where people have asked questions about, why do you want to be here? Why do you want to be here? And you get that in multiple questions. And so you say, well, I've involved myself with your mission. I believe in your mission. And they say, no. Why do you want to come to this school? And then you start getting a subtext and you'd say, well, what are your concerns? And then, and this has happened in interviews, especially in visits. People are much more open. And those are flags.
Yeah.
Those are things you need to.
Are you sure you want to come here? Kind of a flag, right?
Exactly. And that's happened. It's happened in multiple visits. And I'm a little surprised, but I think people really want to let you know that there's a subtext and that you need to think about the subtext. And sometimes you go, no problem, I can handle that. Got it. Here's how I deal with that. And you're fine with that. But I'd say when they start really stacking up at multiple levels of the organization, then you need to start asking questions about your effectiveness there.
So, Greg, that really gets at your point that when you're trying to move into administration, we know how super competitive it is. And on one hand, you've got to measure what are the things that are really going to work for you, that you can come in and be of service and your skill set's going to work. But then as you're saying, boy, some of these red flags are really accumulating in number, but also there's back to what you're saying, this who are you and how do you kind of match up? So could you go a little further on the reality of being someone who wants to become an administrator and you just got to take the job almost sometimes. You got to make that leap because you might not have another choice. Or do you just say, you know what, I've got to stay where I am and continue to be a biology teacher?
Well, great point, Dave, because in the beginning, you just really want to move into admin and you know you've got to just dive in. On the other hand, if there's too many red flags and you're not sure, then wait another year. Really, here's what you stand to lose. If you move into a position that is not going to be the things that you're good at, people will notice. And it sets you on a different trajectory in terms of your success for that position. So even though you say, oh, I can coordinate and I can manage this, and you get there and you find out that it's absolute drudgery and you're trying to, it feels like you're Sisyphus. You're just trying to roll the boulder up the mountain and nobody's willing to work with you, no matter how technically supportive you are. And people are saying, you know, this is just like the third time I've had to do this. You're the third administrator. And now I'm kind of, why do we have to do it this way? And you're the person who has to say, no, this is what we have to do. And they're resenting that. They're resisting that. And all you're going to find is a place where every day you have to go in and deal with and try to challenge yourself to inspire people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. And sometimes, especially when you're new at it, it's really hard. And you may walk away feeling as though you're not successful, that you're not making a difference. And other people might feel like you're not successful and you're not making a difference. And so you stand to really mute and or to slow your approach to being a successful administrator. And I will tell you and admit that I've been in positions where I felt like I wasn't being effective. And the only thing you can really do is to look for a new position where you can be. One thing that you will gain from it is that you know what you don't know.
Right.
You know what you need to do to improve, and you know what you don't want to do in the future. It might be an appreciation course for that. And to that extent, I will say that it's an honor to teach. It's a privilege to teach. And if I had a choice of taking a position that I was not 100% about, or even 80% about, I would probably continue with the honor and privilege of teaching. Just another year, you're looking, you're waiting, you're helping build that teamwork of support. People are getting to know you. If you have a recruiting agent, they're getting to know you, and they're going to say, Greg, we got this position we think is ideal. And it's worth waiting for, especially when you can walk away successful. There's nothing worse than feeling like you've given it everything you've got, and despite that, you don't feel successful. And I can tell you I've been there before, and it's hard. And the challenge is getting back up and doing it again. So, yeah.
Sisyphus on the next day with yet another boulder.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And so I will say that's what you need to think about. What's the worst day going to be like if you aren't able to move things forward? And you will find aspects of the job that are interesting and fun. You will find ways to make the challenge. You'll be creative. You'll be able to move the ball forward. However, it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, these are wonderful answers. Honestly, not what I expected at all. And I love that. You were way more humanistic about it and very, very personal about it, which I appreciate. And I know our audience will too, because as you said, they can go look up all the technical things, but this is your experience that you're sharing from the heart, and just a wonderful series of answers. And we really appreciate you taking the time to come and interview with us. Would you be interested in sharing some kind of contact information where people could reach out if they wanted to hear more about advancing into administration from your perspective?
I'd be happy to. I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find me there. And I'm happy to converse with anyone
Wonderful.
that would have any further questions.
Thank you. So we'll put that in the show notes.
I will say that one of the, it sounds like finishing on a downbeat, but I want to finish on an upbeat. And what I will say is that in my experience, it has been such a privilege to support people at some of the hardest times in their lives, and that it's worth it. If you take a position and you feel that it wasn't a good fit, keep trying, because you're going to learn through it. You're going to be stronger, and you're going to evolve as an administrator who loves kids, who cares for kids, who cares for families, and who is willing to go the distance to make a difference both in their lives and their learning, but ultimately in the community of the school. And if anyone can walk through these different junctures that we've talked about today and still feel that they're on a mission to serve and to love, then they will succeed. Their sincerity, their authenticity, their intentionality will become a new life in the school community.
So thank you, Greg, and I'm going to echo Audrey's sentiments, as I've had so many conversations with you over the years, and 3 times on other podcasts. I'm so appreciative of your thoughtful approach to life as an educator, but just as a human being. So thanks for taking the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm super excited to follow up with you once you get to Zim.
Let me tell you, we step off in 5 days. I'm very excited. A whole new adventure. I cannot wait to meet all of the people in this community and to help them propel this mission. It is a gorgeous mission. We are boldly diverse. We cultivate curiosity. We create learning journeys. It's just a beautiful mission. And the previous director did a fantastic job at developing that mission and building that community that absolutely embraces students and takes joy in watching them learn and grow. So I'm just thrilled to be where I'm going.
Thank you for joining us.
Onward and upward, everybody.
Thank you. Educators Going Global.
You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the other usual suspects.
Please subscribe, like us, and leave a review on Apple and Spotify, and let your teaching friends know about us so we can grow our community.
Please reach out at educatorsgoingglobal@gmail.com and join our Facebook group, Educators Going Global, if you have ideas, comments, or wish to share a Going Global story of your own.
You can also find us on Instagram at Educators Going Global.
Please visit our website as well, www.educatorsgoingglobal.com. All our podcast episodes are on there by topic, along with blog posts, Going Global stories, and our ever-growing resource library. For now, this is Audrey
and David,
inviting you to travel,
teach,
and connect with us.